Welcome back, everybody. It's good to see you again. This week, we're going to the lower part of Ohio. We've already been to Cleveland. Now we're going to take it down a notch. We're going to Cincinnati, home of the Bengals, which f*** up because I'm a Browns fan. Also home to one of the top 20 greatest foods in America. Iconic. We're talking Cincinnati chili. We're talking meat sauce over pasta, onions, cheese, the whole nine. It started off when two immigrants from Greece, avoiding the Balkan War in the 1920s, came to Cincinnati seeking refuge. There, they opened up a hot dog stand. That's where they introduced their meat sauce, AKA chili. Well, they later on went to hire someone who learned that recipe and moved to a place called Empress. And in Empress, they really tapered it, and then it became Skyline Chili. And they went with that so hard because Skyline Chili was actually outselling hamburgers. Motherfucking burgers were losing to poor people food. Fantastic. But you know what's not fantastic? Samuel Little. We are talking about allegedly America's most prolific serial killer in history. Bar none. Confirmed by the FBI and multiple law organizations. This man terrorized 11 different states, murdered allegedly 93 people, confirmed 60. We're talking a general piece of fucking human filth, this guy. So this week, we're doing Cincinnati chili, and this is the case of Samuel Little. Fuck! All right, folks, we're going to Georgia, 1940, where a prostitute gives birth to a one Samuel Little. Now, seeing as Samuel had a mother who was a sex worker, life wasn't very stable. So when he was a very young boy, his mother and him moved to Lorain County, Ohio. And there they stayed with his grandmother, whom everyone kind of thought he was a little off, but no big deal. And they put him in school, and he's admittedly an underachiever. I mean, he doesn't really get along with a lot of people at all. And he just doesn't really want to work hard. It's not for him. He's thinking about other shit. And by thinking about other shit, I'm talking, he's thinking about murder. Yeah, see, according to Samuel, as he was a child, a young boy, kindergarten, this guy had a fantasy about his teacher. One day in class, while he was just chilling there, peeping on her, you know, checking out what's going on, he saw her caress her neck ever so slightly. And from that moment on, he became aroused by women touching their necks. But it was more than that. He also wanted to murder them. He thought that by strangling them, he would get the ultimate sexual gratification. Now we're talking about a guy who's 5 fucking years old. We're talking a kindergartner. Already thinking about rape and fucking murder. Talk about born bad. Like, that's a bad batch. We got to get rid of that guy immediately. And so as we go forward, again, he's not a very bright student. He's not a good achiever. He's not trying out for shit. And so school doesn't go well. And normally with troubled youth, if school doesn't go well, you have to kind of expect the fact that they'll turn to negative things. Negative things such as, I don't know, crime, robbery, assault, all things that he did. As a matter of fact, he went to juvie when he was 16 years old for robbery and assault. And in that time frame, his sexual time, all that, developmentally, he still never shook the idea of hurting women and getting his rocks off that way. This guy collected what was called detective comics back in the day. And back in the day, that was basically bondage porn. Because bondage porn didn't exist, they just did it in that form. So we're talking women being murdered, choked, tied up, gagged, the whole nine, sexually assaulted, all that. And we're this 16-year-old boy with a predisposition to wanting to hurt people already. So this bad egg decides that he's just going to keep going his route, doing what he does. And essentially, it leads up to his first assault. And by assault, I mean a woman, and you know the rest. So we're talking, this guy is just a career criminal. I mean, in 1961, this is crazy to me, only sentenced 3 years for breaking into a furniture store in Lorain, Ohio, where he was raised by his grandmother. Now, he was released in 1964, which, whatever, but between 1964 and 1975, he was arrested 26 times. Crazy amounts of charges. I'm talking anywhere from assaults on public officials, government officials rather, fraud, identity theft, even which I can't fucking say. So we're gonna edit that out. Or not, I don't know. But yeah, so after that, it's just crazy to me. Again, 26 times in 11 different states is insane. Like, I can't even fathom. If you played the lottery 26 times in 11 different states, I'd assume you might fucking win. This guy probably should have just been locked up forever because he sounds like an animal. When you put assault in there with attacking people, it gets pretty rough. However, as he got older, he moved down to Florida in the southern states. And while he was there, living with his mother, who was in her late 60s, they rekindled their relationship, he decided to be a little bit more transient. And so he went to a place called Pascagoula, Mississippi. And I probably butchered that. At me, dude. I don't even know. Okay? I'm not from there. There's already too many S's for me to give that big of a shit. Anyway, so he was indicted for the murder of a 22-year-old woman by the name of Melinda Rose Lepre. These Creole names are difficult. And so as he was there, he basically, they didn't feel confident in the witness statements that placed him at that crime, so he walked. All right, he walked. But when he walked, Florida got wind of this, and they had actually extradited him because there was a 26-year-old woman named Patricia Ann Mount, and she was from Florida, and her body was found in 1982, and witnesses had placed Little as the last one they had seen her with. And again, because of witness testimony being, kind of fragile when you're on the stand, they did not want to use that. And once again, in January of 1984, he was acquitted. So now he's kind of exhausted the South. The South has had it up to here with him. They're not big fans. So he decides he's going to try his hand and move to the West. He goes to San Diego in 1984. He was arrested for the attempted murder and strangling of a lady by the name of Lori Boros. Now, she was able to tell the police about him and everything, which, eventually, because of Lori, they were able to track him down. And when they did track him down, they found him and a woman in a car, both naked, her unconscious, being strangled. Now, with that, they arrest him. But because a lot of these women are a little more destitute, little ladies of the night, they don't really want to prosecute. They don't trust the witness testimony. So the only one that actually happens to affect him is his encounter with Lori, in which he goes to jail for, get this, 2.5 years. Now, after serving those 2.5 years, he's released in 1987. And then from there, they go ahead and, they don't really keep an eye on him. It's back in the day. They don't give a lot of shits. So this guy is able to commit 10 more murders in the Los Angeles area. And as a career criminal, everybody just kind of let it happen. It really does suck. So after he is released and he's doing all that, he just becomes super transient. He goes off the radar. No one really sees him. No one hears from him. But he does get married. He has a wife named Jean. She's a lovely, lovely woman, according to him. And he's gathered some skills from jail. In jail, it is said that, according to him, because he's the greatest at everything he does, as most of these assholes are, he becomes a prize fighter. Yeah, he's Mr. Boxer. He's the new Mike Tyson of rapist, which is also a bad joke. because Mike Tyson went to jail for that. So anyway, he's in jail. He's committed all these assaults, and his DNA is on profile. And with his DNA on profile, there's a lot of cold cases going around. I mean, the South, everything. So they're going to go ahead and just check him out and see what's what when it comes to these cold cases, because a lot of these things, they seem to fit his MO, and in a lot of these places, he was actually there. Like, he'd oftentimes get like weird odd jobs where he would, for example, he liked to work in cemeteries, which is odd enough in itself. He also happened to be an ambulance driver. So he was able to use these skills and just basically go across the country. Sometimes he would go back to places he had been, he'd revisit, and by his own testament, he would go back there and commit crimes again. He was like, they didn't catch me the first time, so he felt pretty confident and complacent. And again, technology wasn't where it needed to be back in the day, so it was a lot easier to get away with this crazy, wild shit. And so, you know, it didn't really catch up with him for quite some time. Yeah, so as we know, this guy has already murdered women. He's already committed a bunch of crimes because he's a career-long piece of shit. So having committed those crimes, the likelihood of DNA being there, probably pretty good, but the technology wasn't there, as we said. And going forward, we're talking years and years and years since he was released from prison in LA, that he ended up in Louisville, Kentucky in 2012. Well, as they're going through some of these cold cases, they find his DNA. And by testing it and finding out it's him, they track him down. And they track him down, and they're just bringing him in for a drug charge. But once they find out that the drug charge is there, they're able to actually connect him. And find out that he was involved in a bunch of murders, one of which was Carol Eileen Ford, and she was killed in 1987 by strangulation. He also murdered, this is going to be butchered, and I apologize, Guadalupe Duarte Apacado, on September 3rd of 1987, and also Audrey Nielsen Everett in 1989. Now, they were all street workers, and they were all found basically behind buildings and in back alleys, just abandoned. Like, he was the type of person, admittedly from himself, that would turn around, and as soon as he committed his atrocities, as soon as he was done doing that horrific shit, he would just drop them right out wherever he could, like, and down embankments, down behind buildings, in alleyways, in gutters and ditches, and anything of the sort. So from that, they're able to identify all those, link him to the crime, and then, because they do that, his DNA is now in the system. And since it's in the system, they track him down to a couple other murders, one of which was Amy Lee Stewart from Cincinnati. Now, she was strangled, assaulted, and left behind an apartment complex in 1981. And they also found 2 Jane Does. And they were in Cincinnati as well, killed in the same manner. A lot of these women, again, destitute, they're workers. So a lot of the time, especially in the 80s, people were dickheads and they didn't give a fuck. Like, it wasn't like they could just put their stuff on OnlyFans. Like, they really had an only chance, and they went out on the streets and they tried to put that work in. So any of you guys who got great subscribers, be thankful. You know what I mean? But later on, they connect him to that. So all those women we've talked about, those are confirmed murders, right? So let's just take a quick walk through. Okay, we got Annie Lee Stewart. We also have Mary Payton. We have Carol Alfred, Guadalupe Abadoco, Audrey Everett, the Jane Doe, Rose Evans, and Denise Brothers. Now, these are all women he is confirmed to have killed. that is tried, that is convicted in Cincinnati, Los Angeles. It's all right there. So he is going to jail in 2012. Now, seeing as he is going to go to trial, he is prosecuted, and they give him, obviously, the life sentence. He is not going anywhere, life without the possibility of parole. That's every sentence he got for all those murders. And he's in jail, and he gets a little bored, you know? So he starts confessing to a jubilee of murders, tons of them. And at first, like, there's no way, this is impossible. I mean, we got this guy, and he's in his 80s at this point, and he's telling us that he's been around the entire country, just murdering an insane amount of women. We're talking over 93 women. That's what he's doing. And he is so nonchalant, so matter of fact, but they're still like, I'm not sure. So even in his 80s, as a diabetic, as someone who's obese, as someone with cardiac issues, he's still able to narrow down the time frames. Because this dude is so much of a psycho, he treats all these women like they are trophies, that he remembers the exact days or at least the time frames in which he committed those crimes. And so he meets up with the FBI, he meets up with the CIA, he meets up with all these people, and law enforcement sits down, has a conversation with them. Someone from Cincinnati goes and he explains that, oh yeah, I remember this, I remember that, I remember the other. Details only the killer could know. But not only that. This man happens to not just be a prolific killer, but he is a pretty impressive artist. So every woman that he admits he killed, he can also draw a portrait of them or paint a portrait of them. I'm talking looking strikingly resemblant to the missing people's photos, all of that. So he's got all this stuff and he's talking to them all nonchalant. I mean, to the tone where he's treating these women just like they didn't exist. Like they were just basically cans of soda you can just throw out the window of your car when you're driving. But then there's other parts of him, and this is where you can see the real psychopathy of this fucking douchebag, is that he'll claim he loved them, but he had to murder them. The minute he saw them, he's like, I saw her neck, and I was like, I had to murder her. And he would go ahead, and he didn't refer to his assaults as assaults. He would be like, no, we fucked. And then I did what I did. But that's not the case. So they're going through, and they're flabbergasted. They can't understand like how this guy is just going to admit to all these other crimes, and why even he would. But they believe towards the end, they knew he was going to die. He didn't have a legacy, and he needed to be remembered for something other than being a career piece of shit. So he comes out and he says all these things. He's like, I need to air this off my chest. And the detectives don't always believe everything that he's saying. So again, they call back to his portraits that he paints, and then they call back to only details the killers would know, and they continue to see this. They're doing this for months. I mean, he was arrested in 2012, and this leads up until 2018. They're going through, and they can confirm, the FBI can confirm, that he is indeed involved in the slayings of over 60 women across the nation. So if that doesn't make this guy probably the most vile human that ever fucking existed in the United States of America, I don't know who is. I mean, I'm glad he got diabetes. I'm glad he has a heart problem. Hopefully, I was hoping it would have hit him earlier. Some motherfucker could die because everyone's too pussy to give him the death penalty. That's how I feel. I'm not going to get too mad. I'm just going to stir this. But, long story short, he admits, again, to 93 murders. They can't place the last 33 on him, but they can't also try him for the 60 because it would just be so tumultuous, so tasking, so time-consuming. The taxpayers, they're all worried about this shit. So they attribute them all to him, and they kind of shut the door on that. And that's basically kind of, sort of, how that situation ends. All right, career criminal, we're wrapping it up. We're at the tail end of this. He had already confessed to all these murders. He had confessed to basically being the bile of the earth as far as human beings can go. I mean, all the way through from the robberies to the assaults to the burglaries to the drugs, especially the murders. I mean, he was sitting there strangling women, rabbit punching women, beating them to death and dumping them away and discarding them as if no one even gave a shit about them. No regard to other people's feelings, not caring that these were actual humans. They mattered to people regardless of what you thought. So what happens then? Every devil gets its due. So he confessed to all these crimes, as far as the murders go with the women and the portraits, in the year 2014. And there's quite a bit of information to take in. So in the midst of doing all this, Samuel has been a gluttonous, fat turd the bulk of his existence. And that tends to catch up with you. And some could call it karma. I'm going to add a little bit of that in there as well. But in the year 2020, the Pandy Wandy, if you will, as some people have referred to it, he dies. It's over. It's over for him. His diabetes, his heart condition, his karmic weight, and literal actual weight, put this asshole in the ground, where he deserves to be. And no one claimed his body. Instead, he's just buried right on the prison grounds, to be remembered forever as basically a fucking monster. But what I'm going to remember forever is this monstrous, fantastic, beautiful dish coming straight out of Cincy. This icon. Look at that. You see that? Now, I'm going to do this just because I'm quite the idiot. I'm going to ruffle it up, and then I'm going to burn the fuck out of my mouth because I'm like a high guy waiting for a Hot Pocket, just too impatient and needs to be in here. So let's just kind of whack-a-mole this shit together, shall we? Oh, look at this, mixing together really nicely. And I know it looks atrocious once you mix it up like this, but I assure you, the sauce, everything. So we got a little bit of everything in one bite. Get a little bit more of that sauce in there. Good golly, Miss Molly, here we go. Ooh. It's unique. It's so much different than the average chili I've ever had. I mean, the chocolate, the hints of the cinnamon really, like, it sets it off. It's not something that I feel like you can just eat a whole bowl of, but when it's in conjunction with these ingredients right here, the onions, and the cheese, the noodles, everything, it just plays off each other so well. It's really balanced. Again, the sauce, it's thickened up, it grabs onto the pasta itself, as you can see. And if I would have given it a little bit more time to melt, the cheese would have really added a little bit more texture. All in all, I could see why it's in that top 20. It's a wonderful dish. And you know what? I have to kind of thank the Balkan War for that, because if not, in 1920, those two gentlemen would not have invaded that place and gave us this beaut right here. So please, subscribe, hit the notification bell, tell a friend, spread the word. Thanks for stopping by. This has been Crime and Dine. Stay safe out there.